But good morning. Welcome to RevvedUP Day 2. Yesterday, we framed the challenge. Today, we get much more specific about what leaders actually do next, because this is the day where ideas have to earn their keep, where AI gets tested against business models, where product gets tested against customer value, and where growth gets tested against execution. And we begin with exactly the right keynote for that conversation. Phil Thomas opens the day with Beyond Scale, Why Human Connection is the Next Competitive Moat.
Which is exactly where this conversation should start. Because in a market where technology keeps making scale easier, the real differentiator becomes harder to fake. Trust, relevance, belonging, and community. And that's what makes Phil's perspective so timely. This isn't a talk about relationships being nice to have, it's a talk about human connection as a strategic advantage.
Exactly. And later today, we close with Darren Courtemanche, EVP and Chief Communications Officer of Major League Soccer, which is a huge win for RevvedUP. Major League Soccer has done something many industries are still trying to figure out. It has built not just an audience, but a passionate, growing community. Not just scale, but loyalty. Not just visibility, but identity.
Community, and that is what connects Phil Thomas and Dan Courtemanche. They come from very different worlds, but they're both showing us the same thing. Passionate, engaged communities are not adjacent to enterprise value, they are enterprise value. One built through global experiences in human connection, the other through fandom, belonging, and a modern sports ecosystem.
And for this room, that is not a side theme, that is the theme. How do you build communities that are engaged enough, trusted enough, and valuable enough to create durable growth? And that is exactly why we structured Day 2 the way we did. After Phil's keynote, we move into the Outsell, Outlook, and Accelerate AI framework. The goal is simple, to give this room a sharper lens for where AI creates real enterprise value. Because the question is no longer whether AI matters. We talked about this yesterday. It does. The real question is where it creates measurable lift, where it removes friction, and where it changes the economics of the business. So at RevvedUP, we're organizing that around 3 circuits. First, AI as licensing revenue. Second, GTM operational efficiency. And third, AI and product. Each circuit includes 2 use cases. This is what makes RevvedUP very unique, by the way, is the use cases we put on stage. It's work in action. Each circuit includes so across the day, you'll see these 6 practical examples of where theory meets the business. In the first circuit, AI as licensing revenue, the focus is on monetizing what companies already own and too often underuse. And it's not just data. It's data, content, intelligence, and audience insight. In the second, GTM operational efficiency, the conversation moves to the operating core, how teams sell smarter, market better, move faster, and reduce drag. And in the third, AI and product, the bar goes up again. Not can we add AI, but can we build something customers truly use, value, renew, and talk about? So 6 use cases, 3 circuits, 1 standard. Not AI as theater, AI as an application.
And surrounding those 3 circuits, we've built a set of conversations that make the day broader, sharper, and more practical. You'll hear from Fabrizio Drummond of Rafa Media in the business of fandom, engineering a media flywheel that wins, a conversation about how passion data and deal making turn audiences into communities, communities into commerce, and content into enterprise value. You'll hear from Pete Pichal in the AI Inflection Point, reinventing growth models in the age of intelligent data, which is a sharp look at how AI is reshaping who captures value from content, data, and digital experiences. You'll hear from Jamie Schulteis from Bombora and Rebecca Solorzano from Forbes about the storyteller's edge, how Forbes uses first-party data to drive brand results. Laura Mullen then takes the stage for Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable, which is a pretty accurate description of leadership right now. Her session is about leading through constant change and making decisions without waiting for perfect conditions, something we heard about yesterday on the CEO panel. You'll also hear transforming operations through AI-led intelligence across all pillars of media, with Lori Silverstein of Strave and Rick Fordyce of Media Radar, an inside look at how leading media tech firms are moving beyond fragmented automation and re-engineering human-heavy workflows into intelligent systems with data and automated decision-making embedded at the core. And then in revenue impact versus operational impact, Adi Chikara of Tricon and Andrew Lippert of Edmentum will push on a critical leadership question: how the best organizations use technology, not just as a cost center for efficiency, but as a revenue center that drives growth, innovation, and competitive advantage. And then our tech panel brings together Michael Barnett of Ingo, John Kazarian of Axel Events, and Verena Papik of Talkalytics with Heather for a blunt conversation, because a conversation with Heather about technology is going to be blunt and to the point. It's about a new mandate. Customers want AI native workflows, clean data and integrations that work without heroics. They'll talk about how they're accelerating product cycles and turning data into AI and AI into outcomes customers can actually measure. And then Kyra Stokes gives us something every executive in this room needs. I know I need it. I'm sure we all do. Invest in your wellness bank, a 10-minute reset focused on movement, posture, energy, and sustainable performance.
Which is not filler, it is essential and strategic. And with the Kyra Stokes, she's going to have her bands here as well. So as a gift from her, she has the Stokes method. So it's going to be very cool, 10-minute little workout. Because stamina matters, presence matters, and a short reset can actually change the quality of the conversations that follow when we do need to take care of ourselves. Which brings us to lunch, where the conversation gets a little sharper. Each table will feature curated hot take cards that we developed, designed to spark candid conversation amongst you. From AI to product power to business model reinvention, talent economics, customer transformation, these prompts are meant to challenge assumptions and get the room talking honestly about what is actually changing and what leaders need to do next. So this is not a polite, small, talky lunch. It's a useful lunch. It's a working lunch.
And then from 3:30 to 5, don't underestimate afternoon tea and lawn games. We've got cornhole, lawn pong, Connect Four, giant Jenga, and some very weird card games that Colleen picked out.
Yes.
Really? Okay. All right. Some of the best conversations at events like this, as we all know, they happen in the corridors, they happen at the breaks, and this is just a fun networking opportunity. You can follow up on Umbrella to make a connection, meet a person that you always wanted to meet, and have some fun with some weird card games.
And I want to thank our sponsors. I know I've been remiss in actually calling them out, but Bombora, OneMind, Tricon Infotech, Omida, Sales Empowerment Group, EY Parthenon, Strave, Excel Events, and then I'll let the rest flow through. But these are very important partners of ours, and we've said before, they are strategic partners. We don't really like to use the word sponsor because they work with us in formulating the content. We consult with them on the way we form the event. So again, thank you everybody for participating. And what we did actually for later the break is coffee, and the break will be in the side room over here. So please visit with the sponsors. And then we have a little fun thing here from Tony Touchard, Soli & Company. I'm actually not quite sure what this is, so you guys should test it out. But he spends time helping companies accelerate insights with data and now AI. And there's a good chance next year most of you will have personal AI assistants helping you out, knowing your work style, etc. So Tony built the hypothetical conference for your personal AI assistants to attend while you're here. So there's a conference going on if you would like to add your assistant, so go check it out. There are even a couple games, and if you win or play the longest on the site, he'll send you a nice marine layer hoodie. And with that, we'll move on to our keynote. Thank you. Welcome to RevvedUP.
Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Josh Peters, VP of Global Data Partnerships at Bombora, and it is great to be back with you on day 2, especially to help open the day with this keynote. At Bombora, we help businesses understand buyer intent and behavior, activate detailed audiences, and measure true campaign reach and influence, all while monitoring the activity and trends across the business internet. And one trend has become impossible to miss. As AI makes scale easier, what stands out is no longer just reach, it is relevance and trust. It is the ability to deeply understand your audience and build a connection that people truly value. Pause for effect. Thank you for humoring me in the morning. That is one of the reasons Bombora is proud to support RevvedUP as a Grand Prix sponsor. This event brings together leaders who are not just reaching or reacting to change, but actively shaping what stronger, smarter growth looks like. And that sets up this next session perfectly. Our opening keynote this morning, Beyond Scale, Why Human Connection is the Next Competitive Moat, gets at one of the most important strategic questions in business right now. When automation expands what is possible, what becomes more valuable, more durable, and harder to replicate. Fewer leaders are better positioned to answer that than Philip Thomas. Through his work with Informa's global brands, as chairman of Cannes Lions, he has helped build platforms where data, community, and experience come together to create lasting enterprise value. Please join me in welcoming Philip Thomas, Chief Creative Officer, Global Brands, Informa PLC, and Chairman of Cannes Lions.
Thank you very much. Morning, everyone. Everybody okay? I flew in last night, so you've got no excuse if you've been here for a few days. I'm going to talk about how we approach events at Informa and how I've approached events in my career. And there's a buzzword at the moment, it's festivalization. What the hell is that? It's a word that really divides people. But in a way, it kind of sums up the way that we're approaching some of our events at Informa, and certainly how we've approached the events that I've run in the past, particularly Cannes Lions. So I want to talk to you today about how we're building value through experience and through human connection. So what exactly is festivalization, or what is this way we're approaching some of our events across the business? For those who don't know, Informa is probably the world's biggest B2B event organizer. Nobody's quite sure how many events we have. You can ask roughly 1,800, but I think we're launching and closing them all the time, so it's very hard to know exactly how many events. A lot of events is the answer. So what do we see in the world of events as we look across all of those different properties? We see a shift. See a shift from transaction to emotion. And obviously, many B2B events historically have been very transactional. I'm a buyer, you're a seller, let's do a deal. And that's really the benchmark that people use to get the value out of the business. But actually, emotion is becoming increasingly important to the customers that we talk to. And certainly, I like to think about how people are going to feel when they leave our events. Not how much business they've done, not how many units they've shipped, but actually how they're going to feel. It's quite a big mental shift. The other big change is from being an event organizer to being the curator of experiences. And I'll come on to a bit about how we look at experiences in a second. And then the really big one is to stop thinking about the venue we're running an event in, but actually thinking about the city that we're running the event in as the canvas for us to paint the experience for the delegates and for our customers. And of course, the difficulty with cities is there's as many different types of cities as there are actual cities in the world. So it's certainly one thing to kind of own the whole of Cannes, relatively small town on the Mediterranean Sea. It's entirely another to think about how are we going to use New York or London or San Francisco as a backdrop. But just that emotional mental shift in realizing and understanding that all good events have what we like to call a fringe. People who are not buying the badges, people who are not engaging, but they're coming to the town because we're there. You've got to have that shift of how are we going to monetize those people. So the way we kind of look at it is we try to approach our events as experiences, and to do that we think about experience design rather than event planning. There's a rather pejorative word or phrase that we use, which is there are two types of event organizers. There are those that try to create experiences, and there are those who put the chairs out. And you know what I mean by that. They put the chairs out, and they make a very professional event happen. But we like to think of it in a slightly different way. So typical event organizers, they're thinking about the logistics, the venue, the scheduling, the food and beverage. But if you're going to think about it from an experiential point of view, you're focusing on the journey of the participant. What is it like the day they arrive in Tampa? How do they get to the hotel? What happens when they get to the hotel? And what happens throughout the whole event? And again, this word emotional, it's about the emotional arc that people are going through. Measuring success. If you hit your budget and you've got the right number of people in the room, you're kind of quite happy. But actually, if you're measuring success much more by how people are behaving, what their perception is, what their business outcomes are, it just shifts the emphasis a little bit. And of course, increasingly using data, and I'm sure you've heard about this already, over the last day or so, shifting from a typical agenda, one agenda, choose your agenda, to much more curation based on your own interests and the data we have on you. So you're going to the kind of conference content that really interests you, and you're meeting the people who really are going to interest you. And the other issue is, whether you're selling passes or they're free, you tend to see that as the ultimate product, but actually seeing the experience as the product is just a mental shift. But what is an experience? How do you describe an experience? There's a lot of talk about the new event, the new way to run events is to make it an experience. But what is an experience? Well, this is my theory and my kind of definition of what an experience is. It's something that you don't only remember, but you can remember how you felt about it. So when you think about it in the past, you think like, I remember when I did that. I remember how I felt when that happened. And I think it's important to have a definition of experience. Otherwise, everybody in the team has a slightly different view of what people want and what they want out of human connection and what they want out of experience. But I think if you just say, look, we're trying to create something that people will remember with an emotional element to it. They're not just remembering it intellectually, they're remembering how they felt about it. That's quite a good kind of clarion cry and rallying call for the team. And of course, everybody knows the numbers. Certainly in the Western world, in the wealthy Western world, experience economy is growing. Young people especially are looking for experiences ahead of things, and that is exactly the same for B2B events. And of course, post-COVID, it's even more. I'm sure any event organizer here has had the same bounce back that we had after COVID, which really was a response to the human need to be together. Humans are tribal. They have to be together. They have to bounce off each other. And I think the bounce back from COVID was a genuine reflection of that basic human need. So events are a thing, and experience is a thing, but how do we bring that to the B2B events that we run? If you look at the kind of things that historically event organizers have done, they've sold space. It's described as selling concrete, and it tends to look like this. So this is a Pinterest booth at one of our events, fairly standard, looks quite nice, but it's nothing to write home about. This is the Pinterest installation at Cannes Lions, where you could get a genuine tattoo, not a pretend tattoo, but a genuine tattoo, and they would modify your clothes, they would modify your shoes, there were massages, they were giving clothing away, and anybody that's been to Cannes Lions will know that that felt like a genuine experience. And of course, there's a lot of talks. This is a typical talk at most events or many events. I think the lady in the front looking backwards says it all, really. She's lost the plot already. Most people are heads down. Let's be honest. I mean, you guys, thank you for your attention, by the way. Really appreciate it. Most of you are heads up. At many, many talks, people are heads down, aren't they? They're looking at their phones, let's be honest. So Money 2020, this is a new stage that we built. It's not just the beauty of the greenery, which, by the way, is all recyclable and goes back to where it came from, but really small things like that seating. That seating was actually the thing that changed the whole experience more than anything. And just looking at the way, how are we going to present our talks, how are we going to present our content, we try and make it memorable. We try and make people think this is a really beautiful environment. And it has an impact. It has a real impact on the response that we get. Networking, I'm sure many of you look at this and go all hot and cold and come out in hives, especially the introverts amongst us. Horrible experience sometimes, networking. So again, we're trying to look at it differently. This is our networking evening at Money 2020 in Amsterdam. We take over a whole street in Amsterdam in partnership with the city. And it's just more fun. So all the bars are taken over. You get passes to get some free drinks. And it's packed, and it's fun, and it's engaging, and it's an emotional connection. And of course, this is a typical exhibition. We've all been to a million of these. How do you feel when you're at this sort of event? You feel like your feet hurt, and you feel slightly dead inside sometimes. You know, if you've got to do a job and you've got to do a deal and you've got to buy some units and you've got to find your suppliers, fine. But it's, you know, you're not going to go home and tell your kids what a great time you had. This is one of my favorite photographs from Money 2020. This is actually at Money 2020. So we want to move from that slightly dull experience into something like this. And the lady on the bottom left, for me, says it all. This is a business-to-business event. She probably works in fintech in some form or another. This was at Money 2020. So this, for me, is emotion at work at a B2B event. But when we're looking at trying to reshape our events at Informa, obviously you've got to have some kind of methodology. So we have a complex methodology. I haven't got time to go into it all now, but we don't just give things a go and hope for the best. We look at it with 3 specific scorecards. So the first is customer desirability, and this is done really through conversations with our customers. So would you actually value this innovation? So if we take over a street in Amsterdam, is that going to be of any value to you? Or, because it has to all be about the value for the customer, obviously. Would you actually value this innovation? And then really critically, can we actually commercialize it? Because one of the questions we get all the time is, when we're talking about festivalization or experience design, the biggest question is, well, who's going to pay for that then? Now, how can I afford that? You know, if you're in a bigger company or even in a startup, how are you going to invest in this? So number 2 is it's got to be commercially viable. How are you going to monetize this? And then finally, can we actually do it? Can we actually create this thing? Have we got the skills, the specialities? Have we got the people that we need to do it? And we score this on a scorecard of 1 to 6. And if it doesn't hit the right criteria, we don't do the innovation. But if it does hit those criteria, then we will innovate if we can do those 3 things as excellently as possible. Cannes Lions is interesting. When people think about Cannes Lions, it's a very large event in Cannes, hence the name, and it's for the marketing industry, advertising industry. And when people say, what does Cannes Lions actually do? Often they think we put on an event in the south of France. One of the most important things we talk to our partners in Informa about is, don't think of yourself as putting an event on anywhere. Try to come up with a compelling description of what you actually do for your customers. So in the case of Cannes Lions, we empower the CMO to bring marketing effectiveness into the boardroom conversation. There's a whole presentation I could do about that. The details are less important than the fact that it's nothing to do with putting an event on. It's about what we're actually doing for our customers. And of course, the team is really important. So again, at Cannes Lions, we don't actually appoint event people at Cannes Lions, especially on the sales side. We have people who are from the industry, nearly always from the industry. And critically, you have to have people who can sell a package of solutions that is so much more than a booth. Finding salespeople in the events industry to sell a booth is quite easy. Trying to find a team who can sell an experience and a sponsorship and multiple layers is really quite difficult. But if you get all this festivalization, so to speak, if you get all this experience together, it does allow you to drive a lot of different revenue streams. So Cannes Lions is known as an event, obviously, but we have our awards, which are multiple tens of millions of dollars in revenue. We have digital assets, intelligence assets that are driven from the IP that we create. We have an advisory, multi-million-dollar advisory business that again is created by the IP that we create. And we have both online and offline learning for the industry that we serve. So once you get this positioning, all built on the emotion of the event that you're putting on, you can develop other revenue streams. So just briefly, I think what we've learned is if you're going to go on this journey of human connection and experience, it's not just a layer to put over what you already do, it's an entire strategic shift. One thing I've definitely learned, and I work across all sorts of industries now at Informa, pharmaceuticals, longevity, gaming, lots of different verticals. What I have realized, doesn't matter how boring the industry seems to be, it turns out that human beings like a bit of fun, and they like a bit of joy, and they want to have a good time. They just want to have a good time. And what we find is that if brands have an emotional connection, then they can stay relevant much longer. But you know, it's not always the answer. And I think it's become quite a mantra now. You know, you're looking at some of the events that, well, Mark Shasher was speaking yesterday. He's got a fantastic stable of amazing experience-led events, you know, Health and Shop Talk and many others. And it sort of feels like everybody's moving towards this festivalization kind of experience transformation. But it's not always the answer, and I was given this amazing example from a digital expo, now long dead. But in their desperate attempt, you can see there, in a desperate bid to secure its future, they got a Ferris wheel. And they put the Ferris wheel outside of the expo hall, and they called it a festival. And we see this quite often. People rename things. They just call it a festival and just hope it'll happen. So it's not always the answer. So just quickly, so I think if human connection, if beyond the transaction, if experiences are something that you want to take your business in that direction, having worked across quite a few, or still working across quite a few of the events at Informa and trying to bring this into the organization, the recommendation is to take it really, really slowly, because you can go down all sorts of really bad alleys. You can waste a lot of money. It can't happen overnight. So forget the word festivalization. You might hate it, you might love it, but you know what I mean by it. It can't happen overnight. And you need a strong brand to start with. You need something that already has some kind of resonance, and you need to spend time really working at what that brand does for the customer, way beyond just providing an event. And you can test and learn. And I think it's a good idea to test and learn with things you can monetize. Because the thing that I get all the time is my margin cannot go down. I run an event, it's a transactional trade show, my margin is 80%, it cannot go down. How the hell am I going to make this more of an experience? So you can test and learn with things you can monetize, podcast studios, VIP lounges, experience zones, that kind of thing. And then I think try to see the city as the canvas, because your customers do. I don't know about you guys, anyone in the event industry, the fringe, as we call it, it's got lots of different names. People going to your town where you're running the event and not paying you a single dollar is a huge issue. And unless teams start to think about, not think about how can I force this person to come into my venue, you think about how can I monetize them when they're outside of the venue. I had this big time at Cannes Lions many years ago. There were hundreds, thousands and thousands of people who would not buy a badge. I thought all I've got to do is make Cannes Lions even better. And it was the day that I had President Clinton speaking that I realized it doesn't matter how much better I make this thing, they don't want it. They don't want it. It's not that it's not good. They just don't want it. So what can we bring them in the city when they're not buying passes from us? And of course, it's all about that customer insight, understanding what the customer really wants and what their return on investment is. Thank you very much.
It was fascinating. I love the whole festivalization concept, and I've been super fortunate in that I've actually had 2 interviews with Phil already. I actually flew to London to get an interview with Phil because he couldn't speak last year. So I don't know if those of you remember, you actually were top billed here. We had your video running.
And then I let you down. Oh no, I didn't let you down.
You did not let me
didn't.
down. You're
Okay,
here today.
Good.
This is awesome.
Good.
So, but what I love about what you talk about is, because it is true, like, and even if you think about what we're doing at RevvedUP, like we put so much passion into trying to make a great experience, because people need to walk away thinking about the moment, not just what they learned, but that they felt cared for, you know, and that they just felt like part of a tribe. And I think tribalism is really key to this.
Yeah.
Which leads me to, and you touched on it in your presentation, but not every market is predisposed to be a Cannes Lion or to be a Money 2020. So how do you actually assess for the people in the audience who are saying like, oh, how do I make my event festivalized? Like, is it a go or a not in terms of the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think the festival word is a really interesting word because, you know, festivals, if you think about what festivals are, they're coming together of human beings to celebrate something. And if you've got an award like Cannes Lions has, it celebrates creativity, and in fact, its whole history is based on that. Celebrates great advertising. So if you're starting with that celebration, then you've got a head start. I don't think every event could or should become a festival, but I think every event needs to think about how people are changing in what they want from B2B events. People are being very particular about where they go. They're being very particular about the events they choose, and the choices before them are multiple. So what I think every event should think about is not necessarily becoming, you know, the festival of pharmaceuticals, but should think about how can I make this experience so much more emotionally memorable for my customers. And the way to do that is through human connection, because that is the basis of all emotion. And that could be really simple things. It could be just much better networking. It could be, I mean, I'm working on CPHI. It's an enormous event in Frankfurt. It's got 65,000 people. It takes over the whole of the Messe in Frankfurt. And they've never had like an opening drinks, ever. Never had it. So they had one last year. It was a huge success. It was just an opportunity just to bring people together a little bit more and take one step from transaction to emotion.
Yeah, that's a good point, is because even I was like listening to it, I'm like, okay, so next year, this is what we're doing here. It's, you know, take baby steps to try to test it out. And a market that, and we spoke about this in our first interview, is a market that I was very deeply entrenched in is manufacturing. And no one would think manufacturing is cool at all. But we were like, how do we make manufacturing feel like they are, you know, hot, like it's a sexy market, and like get them excited? And we did awards. So we made the awards this like gala black tie affair, held it at the Breakers, and we made it the center of the event and then did everything around it. And it worked, actually. Yeah. But like, and did Cannes Lions start with awards?
It actually started with awards, yeah. But I don't think there are many industries where, I don't think there's any industries where people don't want to have a bit of fun. I mean, if you think about Money 2020, right? So the genius who launched it is sitting over there. You know, fintech, I mean, come on. It's like financial technology with all that regulation and, you know, really, does it sound that fun, really, but you can make it much more emotionally resonant.
I actually think those markets are the most predisposed because, again, like going back to the manufacturing one, they were so psyched to actually be able to have fun. You know, it's like we saw a lot of stuff happen in Vegas. I have some stories I can share. So so you're measuring value and outcomes like by experience, personalization. Like, how do you measure that?
You measure it by talking to your customers. So because I think I think it's really important to think about the investment and the margin and these realities, right? And you can blow a whole load of, I mean, you know, for instance, the bill for food and beverage, for instance, at Money 2020, it blows most people's minds. They just cannot comprehend how much we spend on food and beverage. And not every event can move towards that at all. And if you do it, your customers might not value it. So you've got to talk. It's just all about constantly talking to the customers about how is this adding value to your experience. What we're finding across all of our events is that the need for just a booth and a transaction is diminishing, and that is coming from the customers themselves. So what they're saying to us is, yeah, we'll take a booth. I mean, this is such a common conversation across all our events. We'll take a booth, that's fine. A little bit smaller than last year, please. But what else can you offer us? Like, can we have a networking drinks? Can we sponsor some content? Can we get involved in your podcast? You know, can we take people off site to do something? It's actually coming from the customers themselves, and for them, they're saying we need different ways to engage with our customers, way beyond just having a booth.
So they're not reducing spend, they actually may be increasing spend, but they're saying the value is not really my real estate on your show floor anymore. It is actually all of the ways you can wrap value and activation and engagement for us and curate that.
And again, you know, coming back to the practicalities, it's about the team, right? So you've got a team who's used to selling a booth, and the client comes and says, I'll take a smaller booth, what else can you give me? You need a completely different skill set to sell that. You need someone who can really think creatively and work with that customer to think about what they can have. And one of the really interesting learnings I've had, so I've been in this role almost a year, and what I've realized is not every sales team can do that. They really, really can't. Mm-hmm. And that's why I just put that quick slide in there about the kind of people that we employ, particularly at Cannes Lions. You know, they're not event people, they're coming from the industry. And it means that your structure of your business is very different. So for instance, at Cannes Lions, we don't have any rebook. So for event organizers in the room, rebook is like a really big deal, and the higher the rebook, the better. But actually at Cannes Lions, what we find is if you rebook, you're basically rebooking the same thing year on year. Whereas what we like to do is finish the event, have a conversation with the customer and say, okay, you did that last year, what do you want to do next year? And build on it from there.
And by the way, you're so spot on. It's very hard to take a transactional salesperson and move them into a creative consultative salesperson. And what I've noticed is that it's media people actually can do it better going into an event versus an event person and then trying to get them to sell around.
Yeah.
So you are entering a new market, which is longevity, which a lot of companies are now entering into. So how did you tell us about how that's going to, or can you share what your plans are for that?
Well, Informa runs a lot of longevity events, and what I've learned about longevity is it's a massive ecosystem of things, and nobody agrees with anything. So some people like the word anti-aging, some people hate the word anti-aging, some people like the word longevity, some people hate the word longevity. Wellness, oh my God, you can't say that, you can say that. So it's a mishmash of things, but it's one of those markets that is really on fire and on so many different levels, all the way from aesthetics, which is literally, changing your face physically, all the way from aesthetics to exercise, health, supplements, and all of that. So we're just bringing all our assets together and trying to pull it together into a more cohesive offering for people. It's very interesting.
Are there any other new markets you're evaluating and entering into with the Festivalization group?
Yeah, I mean, we've just relaunched GDC, which is a gaming event in San Francisco, 30,000 people. We've relaunched that as the Festival of Gaming. And again, that was a great example because it's sort of easy to say, oh, well, let's call it the Festival of Gaming and hope for the best. But actually, with gaming, that already has an awards, already has a very well-respected award show. And with gaming, it's got that kind of feel, a bit like movies, advertising. It's got that feel of fun, and so we felt we could do that with, and we just had that a couple of weeks ago, Festival of Gaming. So working across that and longevity and pharmaceuticals and aviation and all sorts of crazy markets.
And I guess my last question for you is, if you have to look, if you're to look 2 years from now. Who are going to be the winners crossing the finish line in the events? Like, what do they look like in terms of the event ecosystem?
I think the winners will be those who are up to speed with how people expect their life. I think for a long time, B2B event organizers thought that people kind of unscrew their head and put on another head when they come to their events. Because in their real life, they're expecting, a level of kind of data. So I expect Amazon to know what I want to buy, and I expect to be able to contact people quickly. I expect to be able to have my experiences curated, and if I go to a show, it's going to be an amazing thing. But when I come to a B2B event, I'm happy for it to be really dull. And that's just it's not feasible. It's not really understandable. So I think the event organizers who win are the ones who understand that actually humans are basically humans no matter what.
That's such. By the way, Mark Shashua touched on that yesterday too. I think it's a big theme, and I think it's what a wonderful keynote for us to start day one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.